British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warning of what he's calling an Omicron tidal wave and urging people to work from home today. The Prime Minister also accelerating the country's eligibility plans for booster shots. And joining us right now is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's former FDA commissioner and a CNBC contributor who also serves on the boards of both Pfizer and Illumina. And Dr. Gottlieb, I have to say, this warning from Boris Johnson is making a lot of people kind of sit up and take notice. How do you think what does this mean, especially based on what we've seen out of South Africa to this point?
Yeah, look, it's deeply concerning to see the British take this stance because they have very good data, they have very good systems in place. And so if they're seeing a very significant threat from Omicron, I think the world should really take notice of that. We are seeing some indication of a slowing of transmission in Johannesburg and Pretoria, the hard-hit Gauteng region of South Africa. And if that's true, that's going to cause us to have to reassess some of our early assumptions, either when this first began, the transmissibility, which seems to be confirmed by the data out of the UK, or whether or not there's some subcomponent of the population that's excessively vulnerable to this virus, and after the virus burned its way through that population, it started to slow down. And the most obvious would be people who have Delta immunity but no other immunity, because there is some indication that a lot of the early infections, in fact, most of the early infections in South Africa were people who had Delta but perhaps weren't vaccinated. And there also is some indication that people who had 1351, who were infected with the old South African variant, may have been better protected against this new variant. But looking at what's happening in the UK right now, where they're seeing rapid acceleration, albeit off a very small base, and they're looking at the data, their own data, which is very good data, and are very concerned that this is going to sweep across the population, that should give the world some pause about what this could mean for other countries.
Just here in the United States, according to NBC data, you're looking at some really big upticks in COVID cases, not Omicron. This is like COVID in general, just the positive test responses coming back. Rhode Island up 140% in 2 weeks. You've got Vermont up 132%, gains of over 100% for West Virginia, Illinois, Oklahoma, Connecticut, New Jersey, all about 95%. I mean, those are some big spikes. Is this what we anticipated because of the holidays, or is this more concerning than that?
No, this is the Delta wave sweeping across the country, and the two parts of the country, the two regions that really hadn't had their Delta waves yet, were the states around the Great Lakes, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, which have had a very dense Delta wave in recent weeks and now is starting to peak, and New England and the tri-state region. I think we have the answer to the question of whether or not the tri-state region was going to be largely impervious to Delta because of the high immunity here. It's not. And so we're seeing the last part of the country that really hasn't had a Delta wave now have that Delta wave. So the South, the Southeast, the Southwest, the Pacific Northwest, most of the mountain states and the Great Plains have really been through their Delta wave. Cases are ticking up there, so the national numbers are going up, but they're ticking up because of the holidays and the cold weather. So even in places like Florida, where prevalence has been very low, you're starting to see a tick up. I think what's concerning about the UK for the U.S. is the UK has a very similar composition of immunity to the U.S. There was some speculation that perhaps we were going to be more impervious to Omicron because of our high rates of vaccination and boosters, people who've been infected and vaccinated. But when you look across our composition of immunity, especially when we're done with this Delta wave and 90% of the population has either been infected or vaccinated, it's very similar to the composition of immunity in the UK. So if the UK has a bad experience with Omicron, it's a good indication that we're going to be at risk as well.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, Scott. If I don't know what the effectiveness numbers really are. I saw 23. I don't know whether that's true for Pfizer. But let's just assume that you're double vax. Maybe you got in the booster, maybe you haven't. But let's say that there still is a lot of Omicron spread and infection over in Europe. If the cases are mild to moderate, but you really see a big spread because it's highly transmissible, and we're back to hearing, it's doubling every second, whatever that, you see some of these numbers that say it, that are concerning. If it's mild to moderate, what does Europe do? And I guess that we're down the road and we'd have to figure that out too. We have to decide too, but will it be a full-fledged wave, another COVID wave?
Well, it could be a wave without the extreme death and disease that we've seen from other waves, and that's the hope. The vaccines right now, if you look at the data out of the UK, and albeit it's only on about 600 patients, the 2 mRNA doses look to be about 40% protective. 3 doses seem to be about 75% protective against symptomatic infection, which is quite high. It means that we're not going to lose these vaccines. And we now have other data points that suggest that range of protection in about the same same area as 75%.
Do we quarantine? Let's say you're in Europe.
Well,
I'm asking for a friend.
So
I'm asking for a friend. Let's say you go to Europe, you get Omicron. It's mild to moderate. Do I quarantine for 12 days or something? Am I stuck? Are things going to happen like that?
This is the concern right now. The concern is that the reason why we're seeing mostly mild infections and asymptomatic infections with Omicron is because it's infecting a largely immune-exposed population, a population that has immunity either from prior infection or from vaccination. And so you have protection. What worries us is that if it sweeps across the population and becomes widely epidemic, it's going to find its way into pockets of vulnerability. And the biggest pocket of vulnerability in the U.S. of people who have preserved immunity, meaning that they don't have any immune protection either from prior infection or through vaccination, are children under the age of 18. Only 25% of children under the age of 18 have been vaccinated. Most of them are teenagers. Only 26% of kids under the age of 18 have been infected. And again, most of them are teenagers. We've done a good job of preserving toddlers and young kids and keeping them from getting infected. So if this does become widely epidemic among adults, you have to worry about those immune-naive populations, and it's primarily children. You also have to worry about vulnerable people. Vulnerable people remain vulnerable regardless, even if they've been vaccinated. People who are immunocompromised, older individuals. And so if you infect enough people, law of averages, you're going to start to see bad outcomes. And in fact, they are seeing some hospitalizations in the UK right now. They have reported that.